Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for our second webinar of 2020. We're excited to be bringing the MSP Ignite Resource Network webinar series to our members and invited guests. All of the presenters speaking in the series throughout the year have made a commitment to provide our membership with actionable insight into areas that can help our members grow or otherwise impact their bottom line in a positive way. While webinars like this are the start, our subject matter experts will also be providing more granular content to our members at our peer group meetings. Before I introduce our speakers, I should go over some of the ground rules. While this is indeed a timed webinar, we will make an attempt to answer as many questions as we can. Please use the Q&A function on the webinar to post any questions that you have. We'll ask our speakers as we go along and try and leave some time at the end. All right. We are indeed recording this webinar and we'll send you an email within the next 24 hours with a copy of the webinar as well as a link to our YouTube channel where you can watch the presentation again. Our keynote speaker today is Justin Reinmuth. He's the CEO and founder of TechRug, the Technology Risk Underwriting Group. Since 2004, he and his team have had the responsibility of managing risk and creating policies for over 16,000 IT companies in areas such as cyber liability errors and omissions insurance, management liability insurance, commercial crime insurance, and business owners insurance. Of course, webinars like this don't take place without the assistance of our valued partners and sponsors. For today, we have the pleasure of being sponsored by Huntress Labs. While I'm certain most of you have heard of Huntress Labs, the focus of today's session is really to help you understand why preventive security measures are not enough. We're fortunate to have Senior Security Engineer Dave Kleitland with us today. Good afternoon, Dave.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here. I'm just going to, for those who have heard of Huntress, this may be a little familiar, and those that haven't, and even some of those, we'll dig in a little bit deeper of why preventative security isn't enough and what that looks like. So when our founders founded Huntress, they knew firsthand they could bypass antivirus and network monitoring. But once they gained access, they were rarely challenged. As a result, the headlines looked like the ones you see here. The industry clearly needed a new layer of security to detect threats which bypass preventative security layers. We hear all the time that preventative security is not enough, but what do we mean? What are the attackers actually doing to bypass those preventative security measures? How do you find and eliminate this type of activity? The founders at Huntress know this very well. Each of the three founders has 10 or more years experience as a cyber warfare operator in the NSA. They know firsthand how easy it is to bypass antivirus and network monitoring tools. There is no such thing as perfect prevention. Bad actors spend whatever time is necessary in their labs crafting attacks against the prevention layers in your security stack. So how is this done? Here are some of the standard Windows operating system components which are configured to automatically run. They're used as part of normal system operation every day. They're used all the time for completely legitimate purposes. When a machine is turned on or when a user logs in, these startup events are automatically processed. They can either be used to start user programs like your chat or email, or it can be used for system processes such as your antivirus. So what happens if these trusted applications and processes are configured to do nefarious things without you knowing about it? In this example here, a simplified example really, we're seeing one of these automatic tasks, or what you may have heard called Autoruns, specifically a scheduled task in this instance, being exploited to create a backdoor account on the machine. What does that mean for the victim? Sometimes these items are ignored or even whitelisted by preventative applications because they're legitimate processes built into Windows. We can't necessarily block all scheduled tasks because that would cause things to not work right. And the preventative tools couldn't quarantine a component such as the net command as you see here. Windows would definitely not like that, and it would actually probably break pretty bad. What we're also seeing here is there's no file for antivirus to inspect. Net.exe is a component of Windows that already exists. And even if that account creation, even if this was wrapped into a batch file, it would just be examined, and all the processes that take place are legitimate. So antivirus may not, or other preventative tools may not say that there's anything going wrong. This could actually be a completely legitimate command to run for some reason. It makes it very difficult for those endpoint solutions to convict any action like this as malicious. This exploited autorun is what we at Huntress call a malicious foothold. Our team sees hundreds of these footholds every day. Based on the experience our founders had performing cyber operations in the NSA, the reality is hackers have used some of these same techniques since Windows 95, and in some cases even Windows 3.1 or NT4 if you want to go that far back. The abuse of trusted applications is one of the most used evasion techniques that we see today. Huntress is deployed silently with your RMM or a variety of other scripting tools and things that we have. No pop-ups are needed, no system tray icon pops up, no reboots required. Our agent uses less than 20 megs of RAM and 1% of your CPU. As soon as it's installed, it begins taking its first survey. With the mindset of assumed compromise, it collected data about all of the auto-starting processes on the system, and it sends that over to us. It's important to note that we don't do any of the heavy lifting on the actual device. All of this is done in our cloud to ensure the least amount of impact possible to your customers and users' computers. No one likes a tool that when you roll it out, everyone just starts complaining that everything is very slow and not working. So we're very conscious of that. When we receive the survey from our agents, we take a look at all the metadata associated with the binaries and autoruns from that device. Unlike antivirus, which is determining if the behavior of a file is good or bad by watching what it's doing, Huntress examines the context of why that process is even starting in the first place. This method of thinking allows us to investigate shady persistence methods hackers are using to maintain long-term access. This allows us to be very sure of what we're seeing before we report an incident to you. This ensures incidents we report are actionable intelligence without any guesswork. One of our differentiators in these incidents that we report to you is that we provide step-by-step instructions written in a manner a junior analyst or a help desk technician can perform the remediation. And now with our new assisted remediation feature, that analyst can simply click a button to review our recommended remediation plan and approve our agent to carry out that remediation for you. This negates the need for you to hire a team of pricey security rock stars to remediate these types of incidents. We're a channel-first product built from the ground up with the MSP's business model in mind. We have a multi-tenant dashboard, RMM deployment scripts, and PSA incident to ticket integrations with many of the tools you already know and love. Unlike other managed detection and response platforms, we do provide those step-by-step instructions in a remediation playbook, allowing you to use your own labor to resolve incidents. We're able to pass the savings on to you instead of charging another $5 or $6 on top more per endpoint. This gives you the option to work with a team of security researchers for the price of a product. Huntress won't bog down your endpoint as our agent takes a survey every 15 minutes and isn't competing with your antivirus solution for real-time disk access. New surveys are only transmitted to us if there are changes, ensuring that we're not an overly chatty product on your network. Huntress should be the easiest product you ever deploy, and we've easily deployed thousands of agents in just a few minutes. Many of our partners asked us for a way to help them provide value to their end clients. We're all familiar with the inquiry from a client when everything's going super well, they just want to know what we're paying them for since everything just seems to be working. This is a deliverable that we've created. It's a co-branded report that's customizable with your logo, company color, and your client's name. So in this example here, the example IT logo would be yours, the Wibble Bank would be your client's name, and everything that you see here in these shades of blue, you customize with a friend, familiar company color of your own. This deliverable, it provides a high-level breakdown to show you your clients that you're being proactive in removing infections instead of being reactive. In this example, you can see there were no incidents, which is that red spot at the bottom of the funnel. You can see there were no incidents, which is a good thing to be celebrated, but we're validating that number by showing you how we got there. Much better than a typical no news is good news approach as we see from some other security products in the stack. They can be printed out, you can deliver these with your QBRs, or we can email them directly to your client in a monthly and quarterly intervals. So let's face it, my job is to stand up here and tell you how awesome Huntress is, but you don't have to take my word for it. We do offer an unlimited agent-free trial to test this for yourself. The example here on the left-hand side is sort of an example of a ticket that we would put in. This is an auto task example, but we have integrations with all the popular PSAs. And we provide right here at the top, the PowerShell payload. That's talking about how it is it's an overview, it's plain language of what the malicious thing we found was. Right below that is sort of the risk-based overview, like this is a high risk, we recommend you wipe the host. We provide you links and data to it. We show you the security products that were on the machine when the breach happened. And we do that for a couple of reasons. The main reason is so you can, if you know certain products are supposed to be on there and they're not in the list, you know that it may have been disabled by an attacker. And then below that is the remediation instructions. So you can test this product for 21 days at your first 3 higher critical incidents. If nothing else, you can walk away knowing a bit more about what may be on your endpoints or devices. You can find out more about us at huntress.com. The free trial link is right on our homepage. We also do a monthly webinar called Tradecraft Tuesdays. Our co-founders get together to discuss issues that affect MSPs, the latest security threats and trends that we're seeing, and how to address and protect this low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of Q&A from the audience, which really drives the conversation. And it's actually my favorite thing that we do here at Huntress in terms of our education. So sign up for that at tradecrafttuesday.com and check out our YouTube channel. You can just search for Huntress and you can see all of our past episodes and much more. Thanks everyone for taking the time to join us today. If you decide to check us out, I look forward to working with you on your Huntress Trial deployment. Now let me turn it over to Justin.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So I'm going to address, I guess, the insurance slash, not I guess, I'm going to address the insurance slash risk management portion of this webinar. So once I get control of this, I don't know, John, if I can get control. There we go. Okay, so as you guys are all aware, there's a lot of money to be made out there right now. The market's supposed to explode over the next 5 years. However, we always caution our clients, with this opportunity comes greater risk, as Huntress just identified. So, for years and years and years, MSPs always would come to us, and insurance was always kind of their solution in terms of risk management. And we've always had what we call, I'm going to get into it here, PIC, protection, insurance, and contracts. And I think now more than ever in this environment, it's vital to me that an MSP follows, these things. So here we go. Keys to effective risk management. So the first one, when I say PIC, that stands for protection. Making sure that you guys internally, are doing everything correct. I'm not here to talk to you guys about what you need to do in terms of MFA on everything or EDR, active threat hunting. That portion is your portion. But, the other side of that coin is making sure that your clients, are properly protected. And, having gone through tool set compromises and the claims that we've gone over the last 18 months, I can tell you that if you guys aren't making your clients follow some sort of industry standard, i.e. NIST, ISO, you pick it, you're going to get in trouble when the attorneys come at you on the other side. If you take a doctor, he's got to follow the AMA guidelines. If you take a lawyer, right, he's got to follow the bar. An architect, the AIA. You guys have to be following some sort of guideline. So if your client is going to be the doctor and the patient, and they're going to want to decide, what protections they want in place and what they want to do in terms of cost, that's up to you. But make sure, that whether it's, some people call them denial of service letters, I like a critical action letter, warning them. I guess I kind of use a doctor analogy. If you go to the doctor and they say, hey, you've got high cholesterol, the doctor doesn't say, well, hey, if you don't bring down your cholesterol, I'm not going to see you anymore. He says, hey, in order to get this cholesterol down, I need you to eat cabbage 1 time a day. I need you to walk around the neighborhood. I need you to go to bed at 8 o'clock, right? He gives you a plan. And that same sort of thing needs to go on with your clients. Again, going back to the doctor analogy, every time you go in, if your cholesterol is still high and he's docking the file, God forbid after the 8th time something happens and, a spouse or a family member tries to go back at that doctor, he's just going to hand the court and the judge, here's my file. Here's the 8 times that I told him, you got to eat cabbage. You got to do these things to lower the cholesterol. What do you want me to do? Go over there and walk them around the neighborhood and do stuff like that. So, I think that, making sure internally that you guys are protected and making sure that you guys, your clients are following some sort of standard. It really needs to be a team approach. It's not you dictating to them. It's we have to follow NIST, or we have to follow what we told our insurance carrier we would do. And the reason that that's important is because you just don't want a situation where you're misrepresenting to the carrier that, hey, we're doing A, B, C, D, and E for our clients, and you're really not, and something happens, and then you go to use the policy, and it's no good. And I think that message needs to be relayed to the client. Is, again, it's a team approach. It's not me telling you, it's the government and my insurance company telling us what we need to do. I think that approach is better received. The second thing, I don't know if I have control yet. Okay. The next one here is insurance. and this is going to come in a later slide. I'm horrible about following slides, but most people think that all cyber E&O policies are the same, and they're just not. I've had just this week, we're on Wednesday, and I've had 4 people send me their policy and say, hey, I've got cyber E&O. Can you tell me how it compares to what you got? And they send it over to me. It has no cyber extortion. One had a failure to backup exclusion that said, if you're in charge of backing up your client's data and the backup doesn't work, and you go to pull that backup and they sue you because it doesn't work, don't come knock on our door. That's a nasty exclusion. I've seen them where people, don't have first-party business interruption coverage. So, when it comes to certain types of policies, auto and workers' comp, those are regulated policies, if I'm going to use the word. It doesn't matter whether you're with Progressive, Allstate, or Geico. If you wreck your 3-year-old Honda, they're going to give you the value of the 3-year-old Honda. When you're dealing with cyber errors and omissions insurance, some carriers might cover certain things, other carriers won't. So, the devil's in the detail. And again, much like if you had a heart problem, right? At first you go to the general practitioner and then he says, hey, wait a second, this is beyond me. You need to go see a specialist. That would be my advice to you. If you're dealing with an agent or agency that, after the call with you, they're picking up and answering a call from a bakery and a landscaping client and a manufacturer, it's probably not, they're not keeping up to speed with what's going on in the industry, and it's probably not in your best interest. So again, just making sure that you got the proper insurance. I'm going to identify 5 things on some later slides where we probably see 99% of the claims that you got to pay attention to, but that'll be coming up here. And then the last part of the puzzle is contracts. Is making sure that you have the right contracts and SAL, statement of works, in place. Anymore, I think that the contract almost has to require that your clients carry cyber during the terms of the agreement. I think it's a good business continuity plan. What do I mean by business continuity? If you've got a client that, I don't know, let's say it's a medical client, and they're at an AMA conference and they leave an unencrypted laptop in the back of a lift, and all of a sudden they're on the hook for $250,000 of notification costs, and they don't have a cyber policy, and they're 6 months into a 36-month agreement, and they go away, you just lost 30 months of recurring revenue. The other important thing is why your client should carry cyber is, again, it's good risk management. If your client clicks on a link and they send somebody $40,000 to someone they shouldn't have, that's a them problem, not a you problem. But they might come back and try to test your limits, and that's where the contract needs to say, hey, I'm your MSP, I'm responsible for these items. You're the client, you're responsible for these items. Because at the end of the day in this environment, you can do everything right, the client can do everything right, and things can still go wrong. So, to me, if protection was the only solution, you wouldn't need insurance and contracts. If insurance was the only solution, you wouldn't need the other two, and vice versa with contracts. The other thing that, I'd point out is that, over the last several years, we've seen, a lot of these MSPs are signing contracts with their vendors, which, is great, but, there's terms in those agreements with the vendors that obligate you to share certain things with your clients. And a lot of MSPs aren't doing that. And we've seen situations where we get into lawsuits and, a particular vendor says, hey, by signing this, you're acknowledging that you shared the terms and conditions of our agreement with your client. And MSPs aren't doing that. So what happens is then when the client wants to turn around and go after the particular vendor, the vendor says, hey, the MSP signed this and they said that they shared these terms and conditions with you and you were good with them. And then the client's going, well, wait a second, MSP, you didn't share this with me. So there's just a lot of moving parts right now, and making sure that you guys are getting down, to I guess a detailed level in terms of these three things are extremely important. If we go to the next slide here, again, I just wanted to highlight, 5, you can pass this one. I already said, policies are not the same. But I just wanted to highlight 5 areas where we see the most common kind of claims and exclusions. It used to be for years it was client data loss. Now with kind of over the last 18 months, that's switched a little. But, we had, again, up until probably 18 months ago, the number one claim we would see is client data loss. This is right on the screen here. This is an example of a carrier who put this exclusion in the policy where they say, you can read it, but this exclusion would not apply to, content, or would apply to content and failure for you to ensure that the backup of content. So, what they're saying here is, if kind of using that backup exclusion that I used earlier, is if you're in charge of backing up data and the backup doesn't work, and your client sues you and you want to put a claim in against the policy, don't try it. So, you got to pay attention to there on the exclusions. I'm going to show you another example from another carrier where they clearly say, if you want to head on the next slide, I'll show both of them. But they are telling you here that in no way, shape, or form are we responsible for the repair, correction, replacement, reproduction, reprinting, restoration, and then if you go down for any service, property, data, or any information of any type. So this is a clear-cut data loss exclusion. So making sure that your policy has client data loss is going to be extremely important. The next thing that we're going to focus on is network security. And in this day and age, MSPs, you got to make sure that you've got a full first and third party. So when I say first party, that's to protect you. Some examples of first party coverages would be like cyber extortion, business interruption, data recreation, cryptojacking, invoice manipulation. There are coverages that protect you as an MSP. When I say third-party coverages, those are coverages that are there to protect you against clients' allegations of negligence and you providing the professional services. So this is a sell sheet that a carrier sends out saying, hey, this is our policy and this is everything we include. I would say probably, 30, 40, 50% of the policies that we see when a client's switching over comes from this particular carrier. If you look at the first column on the left-hand side, there you go. If you look at the first column on the left-hand side, you'll see under the first-party coverages, they have asterisks and then they have not applicable. So for this particular vendor, they're saying if you get hit with cyber extortion and you pick this policy form, you can't even add it. You're in trouble essentially. And I was talking to an individual today in Kentucky, and he had said to me, he was worried about all these exclusions and what's going on, and I don't know, having gone through 11 toolset compromises in our firm for our MSPs over the last 18 months, I've never seen a situation where they haven't been covered. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be in the future where somebody did something wrong, but this would be a clear example of why someone would say, oh, my policy didn't cover it. Well, if you read the policy form, you'll see that cyber extortion, you can't even add it to this, so why'd you pick that policy? But again, the MSP isn't going to read it, and it goes back to my previous comment about you got to make sure you're getting with the right agent and agency, because if you aren't, they're just going to check a box and say, oh, you got E&O. Well, they don't know that in this particular carrier, there's three things, and even if you pick their Mercedes product, which is that third or fourth column, all the stuff in terms of cyber extortion and business interruption, it's still optional. So if you don't check the boxes, you're not getting it. So if we go to the next slide here, doing some exclusions, I guess, that you probably should pay attention to. There are some carriers, there's one in particular I can think of, that they ask you when you're filling out their application, they'll say, did you do due diligence of your vendors? In other words, are you guaranteeing that they are doing certain things? And also, I believe that they asked, the last time I read it, they also asked that that particular carrier, in case of a breach, that you've gotten them to agree to indemnify you and hold you harmless. There's no way you're going to get Microsoft or any of your vendors to do that. So if that exclusion is either A, in there, or B, if it's on the application, there is no way you would ever be able to live up to that standard. You got to get away from that particular carrier if that's in there. Another one that we see is the failure to install, apply security software updates, releases, patches. I know with us, it's as soon as reasonably possible. Again, out there, some people are strict, and they'll say if you're running version 1.1 and you don't go to version 1.2, you're in trouble. And you guys all know, everyone on this call is, between whitelisting and making sure everything's clear, there might be a week, 2 week, 3 week gap. Living with that exclusion on that policy is going to be trouble. If we go to the next slide, here the third thing I just want to point is the actions of a rogue employee. A staff mistake and rogue employee is 25% of the claims that we see. Carriers are getting better about including, I don't want to say it's blanketed out there, but they are getting better about including the actions of a rogue employee. I know that we had one probably about a year ago where they didn't cut off the credentials of an employee quick enough, and he went in and shut down a couple clients. And listen, a grand jury was summoned, and this guy's going to get in trouble and go to jail and all that sort of stuff. But one of the clients that he shut down was a practice plastic surgeon. They had like 7 offices, and they were backed by a VC, and they were actually in the process of going through getting a loan for like $1.some odd million, and it disrupted the loan. And so, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit came back at this MSP. So, making sure that the actions of a rogue employee is covered there. Probably on 85% of the claims that we see, they're going to throw in breach of contract. So, if it's in the contract that you're going to back up client data, you go to pull the backup and the backup doesn't work for some reason, it's corrupted. In there, you better believe that they're going to sue you for breach of contract. So, making sure that you got breach of contract would be another important thing. And again, I don't want to go too long on insurance, but the last thing that I'd make sure that you got coverage for is, if you're going to, work with vendors, right? And these vendors are doing backups and hosted email, whatever it may be, making sure that you got coverage for the actions of your vendors. I just 2 or 3 Sundays ago had a situation where our MSP, where a vendor, they didn't have 2FA on something, and they got through. They accessed not only my MSP, but several other MSPs. Now, again, luckily, the way the policy form is written is that he had coverage under the policy, but this would be another example going through the application process. I just want you to kind of keep this on your radar, where this particular carrier, is asking you in that third column, do you have written, contracts in place? I'm sure you're going to have written contracts in place for these various services. But that fourth column, are you able to contractually recover from direct losses arising out of the failure of their services? You might as well put no if you've ever read those contracts. If you put no, that particular carrier might not offer you coverage. If you put yes and it's not true, you could run into violation of misrepresenting the facts to the carrier. So, making sure that you got this coverage for the vendor is going to be extremely important. So I just kind of wanted to highlight those 5 things, and I think on this next slide might be the questions, and I didn't know if anyone had questions or if I should kick it back to Steve.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Justin. So we do have a couple of questions that were posted, and anyone that does have questions for Justin, we do have some time. Justin does a good job of not making it a long, boring talk about insurance, so thanks for that, Justin, but we do have some time. One of the things you said as you were going through your 5 points, and I'll make sure I understood it right, did you say 25% of the claims are due to a rogue employee, or 25%?
Or a staff. Yep, or a staff mistake. So a quarter of the claims that we see on the cyber side are a staff mistake or a rogue employee.
Gotcha.
It's a high number.
Yeah, it's a real high number. And the interesting thing is, we always hear from people, well, no, the people we hire, they would never go rogue on us. They would never be that upset about anything to do that. But the fact of the matter is 25% of the time, that's probably all people that thought that would never happen to them.
And Steve, just to let you know on one other point, I had a client in California where, again, it's kind of like you said, you think you know people until their backs are up against the wall. This particular employee social engineered their clients, and he got 2 clients to pay him $15,000.
That's something. That's
so I just want to let you, and this guy, I never thought that employee would do it. All of a sudden now, he's getting sued. And, to your point, I mean, you think you know people, but what's going on in their personal life, you might not have, much information about that, which is fine, but just, I guess trust but verify.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that goes for everything we do, right, on this side. You said something about vendors like Microsoft, for example, just not willing to cooperate in some way. Can you expand on that?
Well, I don't think they're not willing to cooperate. Right? I mean, we're talking about, they're the 900-pound gorilla in the industry. I mean, or any, you pick some of these vendors, they're almost, they're so big that, when an MSP, if you go through their contract, right, I mean, they're not responsible for anything, but they're also in a lot of these contracts, again, I'm not going to say all, but I've read a lot of them where, there are certain obligations that MSPs have to share with their clients. And if you aren't doing that via SALs, you're going to get in trouble because you're signing off and you're telling Microsoft or some other of these vendors that, yeah, I've shared the terms and conditions with my clients. And by signing it, I'm telling you they're cool with it. And if you didn't tell your client, you're in trouble.
A specific vendor who's not going to pony up if a breach happens through their tool, for example.
Correct.
Yep.
So basically, by the MSP signing it, they're saying, hey, listen, you're going to indemnify us. Even though we had a breach and it was on our system, The MSP said he shared this, you guys reviewed it, and you're good with it. And that's what I'm talking about is that, you got to make sure in this day and age that you've got, insurance, risk management, risk transfer techniques in place. If you aren't doing those things, you got to be cautious, because the attorney on the other side, I always tell clients, as good as our attorneys are, when you shut down a company, their attorney's going to be really good too.
Such a good point. We always say that we hate to throw insurance companies under the bus, right? But let's be fair. They do two things better than any other business on the planet. They collect fees, of course, they should, that's their business. And they look for reasons not to pay out. And in fairness, they should do that too, right? That's part of their business. If there's a reason to not pay somebody, they shouldn't pay them.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, sometimes there'll be an article in the newspaper and somebody, or on the internet, and I'll get it forwarded. And then when I actually read what's going on, there was a reason that the carrier excluded, and it was a good reason. You know what I mean? So like somebody had sent me the other day something that was actually a cyber crime, and they tried to turn it in on the E&O. And, listen, if you're going to address a crime exposure, you do it on a first and third party crime. You don't do it on your first and third party E&O insurance. I mean, you wouldn't address a client's, firewall problem with a backup. You know what I mean? Like there's certain insurances and they do certain things, and you got to make sure as an MSP, hey, I do have a cyber E&O exposure, right? I do have a first and third party crime exposure. I do have a management liability exposure. I think sometimes MSPs think, oh, I got this policy and it just does everything. And that's just not the case.
You just highlighted something that comes up all of the time. And it's really important to be working with someone that can explain to you, yes, it's important for you to have E&O coverage, but what that really means. Like so many of our providers out there, our MSPs out there, think that's the big question. Do I have E&O insurance? Yes, I do. I'm covered up to $1 million. Great. And yet the breaches, they're not necessarily something that you made an error or an omission on, right?
Yeah, I mean, correct. And like you said, just even using like, hey, I got the box, I checked the box, I got E&O. I mean, that's no different than me saying, hey, listen, I went to Best Buy and it's got a built-in firewall. I mean, you really think that's commercially, commercial grade firewall? No, it's not going to be, right? If it's built into your Comcast system or whatever it may be, and that's the same sort of thing is that, the devil's in the details, and making sure, that you've got the right E&O policy. I can't tell you enough. These policies are unregulated. If you're not going to take the time to go through the legal document and read it and make sure it covers what you're doing, you got to get with someone that's doing that for you. It's no different than you don't probably know how to do your taxes real well, so you go get an accountant. You might not know how to handle a lease negotiation the best, so you go get a lawyer. My advice would be the same on when it comes to cyber E&O is that, if it's your Rotary Club buddy or if it's your golfing buddy, I had a situation, this guy wasn't a client, his private cloud got nailed, called up, we had to wait till things calmed down, and, he had gone with his local buddy and got the insurance, didn't have E&O insurance, and then the insurance agent, after he was shut down for a week, they ended up firing him.
Wonderful, right? We're here to provide content, and I want to do that, but there's a bunch of questions that came in related to this, and you just touched on it. And I think it's important to know that while you're a resource out there in this industry, you have been for quite some time, your business is to write policies, right? Or to sell insurance policies. Yeah,
as much as I'd love to review people's policies, I just, with everything going on, because we do, I would tell you the one thing, Steve, over the last 18 months with my staff is that, calls that used to be 15 and 20 minutes, they're now 45 minutes, right? So, that's a lot of 12 and 13-hour days here. And, even the qualification process, again, I don't know if I'm allowed to speak about TechRug or if I just want to keep this in general insurance. You go ahead and make it. Okay. Well, okay. I was just going to say, like with us, we have a risk assessment that we process that we go through. I think a lot of people, I had a gentleman email me today that, hey, I renew on 3/4, I need to get coverage. And I just told him, I don't think I can do it, because what you're going to find is these carriers with this going on, they've only got three choices. The first choice is, hey, listen, we're getting out of the MSP business. I think a lot of MSPs have seen those emails because I've seen them because they forward them to me. The second option is, hey, your $1,000 premium is now going to become $5,000 because this is high hazardous. Or your third option is, hey, listen, the barrier to entry is going to be a little bit more difficult, but you can get really good coverage. It's still a really good rate. And that's where TechRug comes in. I mean, that's what we do, is that we take you through a 110-point risk assessment. I send that to, me and my staff. I pay a risk engineering company a lot of money. It's a third-party company that goes through. They take a look, are you doing MFA on everything? Do you have these written procedures in place? Because for our clients, we do want to be able to offer broad coverage. We do want to keep the premium low. We do want to keep the deductible low. But we got to make sure that we go through a process to do that. And I know with us, what I thought was going to be a pain in the you-know-what exercise, probably 85% of our clients that come back, or the people that go through this process, they comment and say, hey, I'm glad I went through it. It showed me some things either A, I got to sharpen up on, B, I got to pay attention to, or C, I got to implement. And, I always tell our clients, if we can do 1, 2, or 3 things to prevent your tool set getting compromised, we're never going to know that we did it right. But I got to take you through the fire drill or tornado drill, because if the tornado comes through town, we got to know what to do.
So, it's funny because I'm watching the questions come up and I'm trying to lump them together because a bunch are very similar. And I'm getting questions like, so does Justin review our current coverage? We're looking for someone to do that. And that's kind of like saying, hey, I have an MSP I'm really happy with, or an IT service company I'm really happy with, but I'd love to have you come in and just tell me what you think of what they're doing.
That's a great analogy. That's a great analogy.
And the truth is, there's probably nobody out there whose paid position is to come and just review what you have, right? The people that are going to review it are the people that are selling policies. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, even with us, I'm not really concerned what an MSP has. I mean, I'll use it like a doctor analogy. I mean, if you went to the doctor and had your, x-rays and stuff like that, that's great. But when you go to the other doctor, he might say, I want to do an MRI. I want to do things certain ways. So, I'm not really concerned what people carry. I just know if you're going to work with us, this is what you got to carry, and this is what we got to be doing in this day and age in terms of risk management, risk transfer processes. I don't know what conversations you had previously, but that's not really my job. My job is to make sure today going forward that you're in the best position you can be.
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, because whatever conversations you had with you and your agent, you guys determined that was the appropriate coverage. I'm not going to, when people say, well, compare apples to apples. So if you got cyber extortion, you want me to not quote cyber extortion? I'm just going to do what's best for the MSP when they come to us, in terms of limits, in terms of their coverages, in terms of their deductibles. But again, it has to be more than insurance. We got to do other things.
So that brings up a great point. You used the check the box expression earlier, and I tend to use that a lot. And let's face it, the vendor community that sells into our industry, they would like you to believe that if you buy their product, you're covered to a certain aspect of making your clients more secure. They will never tell you we guarantee it or anything else, but I find in this industry, especially our MSPs out there, and I guess any IT service provider really we're talking about, right? Whether they're managed services or not, we tend to think in terms of, okay, there's a hole, I've got to buy a product that plugs that hole. And then when we learn of another hole because we found out of another way that someone was breached, we look for another tool to cover that hole and we're constantly plugging holes in this industry. And I find that's kind of that check the box approach that you mentioned earlier. And I believe, and we're doing something like this in peer groups, so maybe you're going to corroborate what we're doing or tell me we're out of our mind. I believe we need to take a more holistic approach to what is your approach to looking at your environment and your client's environment and putting policies and procedures in place that check all the boxes for doing the smart thing when it comes to cybersecurity coverage. Now, if we go through all these processes and we say, we believe that we should have a policy in place that notifies the client anytime one of our employees leaves our company. Because after all, with social engineering today, that might be the best way someone's going to get into a client. Hey, look, this person no longer works for so-and-so. I want to jump in there. I'm going to see who his clients are. I'm going to make some phone calls and ask for help logging into the server, right? Which has nothing to do with any tool we might have bought. It has to do with social engineering. So my question to you is, if we put policies and procedures in place, for example, that says we notify clients within 24 hours of any employee leaving our company so that they're aware not to open the door for this person if they call, so to speak. Does that help at all with the coverage and with the coverage, with the premium amounts, or with the likelihood of being covered? Do those types of policies help?
No, it's a great question. I mean, I think this day and age, you know, if you were to take a $5 million MSP and a $5 million architect and engineer, the architect and engineer is going to pay 4 to 5 times the premium what the IT provider is. So the
Right.
premiums, you know, I don't know where it's going to go in the future. I mean, you know, again, for our clients, you know, there hasn't been 5 times the premium. Then it's just not going on. But I don't know. Will in 10 years we be there? I don't know. You know, if we are, then doing some of the stuff that you're talking about might add credits, right? But if you're looking at a client, you know, that's $800,000 and, you know, with us, they'll pay $1,400 a year, you know, even if you do it and you get 10%, it's 100, you know, they just really aren't interested in our syndicate isn't interested in doing it. They're more interested in saying, hey, up front, are you doing the right things? If you're doing the right things, then here's a broad policy. But if you're not doing the right things, then, you know, don't come knock on our door.
Right.
You know, and I still think, you know, even going through it, right, forget insurance, you know, by not doing certain things, you know, insurance isn't going to make up for the losses. What do I mean by that? So if kind of what we were talking about, if you have a situation where your tool set gets compromised and you're skimping out on security and you've got 30% of your clients that leave you and they left, you know, all those clients left and they had 30 months, you know, of time left in those agreements, the carrier isn't going to come in and say, well, hey, we'll pay you for the next 30 months for each of those clients. The point of insurance is to bring you to where you're at before the time of the loss. So,
Right.
you know, that I think, again, oftentimes, you know, MSPs will think, oh, well, I got insurance. They should just take care of everything. Well, they're not going to. I mean, it's no different than a restaurant. I mean, if you've got, you know, a restaurant that gets burnt to the ground, it takes 6 months to go up, and you've got a great customer who came in every Tuesday and ate steak, and they don't come back because they found a new steak place, the insurance company is going to say, hey, for the next 10 years, we'll pay you that guy's tab. I mean, it just isn't going to do it. It stops once you're up and going. So, you know, again, it goes back to protection, insurance, and contracts. I think you got to do all three. If you aren't doing it and you're strictly looking for insurance, it's probably going to let you down because it isn't going to take care of everything you think it probably should take care of or want it to take care of. And at the end of the day, if you aren't doing the other things, you know, you're going to have to take out $20, $30, $40 million limits if you aren't limiting your liability and doing certain things, and you just aren't going to be able to afford it.
Yeah, and one of the things we always speak about is doing the right thing covers a lot of ground in a lot of different ways, right? I mean, it's one thing to worry about our premiums, and I guess the smaller the MSP, the more the amount you're paying in premiums matters to them, right? It hurts more because you're smaller, and that's only one part of the equation. What we really want to do is make sure that if a client suffers a breach and there's an audit that goes on, that we are not viewed as the reason for the breach, not just because we don't want to be the reason our client maybe doesn't get paid because the buck gets passed to us, but also because we don't want the client to get paid and then go, now I need a new MSP, because after all, the insurance company paid me, therefore there was clearly a problem and I need to get it fixed by moving. So we want our clients to feel comfortable, even if they are breached, that we did all the right things, or that we documented why we didn't do all the right things, because let's face it, sometimes the client gets in the way, right? I don't want another lock on my door. I can't afford an alarm system. I mean, take the basic security features.
And that's where I go back and tell you, you know, you got to get your clients to follow some sort of standard. If you don't, you get into court, the lawyers are going to say, well, why does client A have that and client B doesn't? And you're going to say, well, client B didn't want to pay me. Client B is going to say at that point, you didn't tell me that.
Right.
You know, why are you treating clients different? You know, and so that's where you run into. We got to be able to point to a standard if we go to court. Which,
yes. So whether you're tying to NIST or you're tying to something else, it makes sense to tie to something that's out there acknowledged as a standard.
Absolutely.
So we've got a bunch of questions that we probably can't answer the right way for the individuals asking them, but let me see if we can try and get to some of them. We've got some people on the call that are smaller, maybe even a one-man IT company. Are the premiums such that someone that small can't afford the insurance?
I mean, I guess afford is is really up to the individual. But I mean, again, with us, there's bands. I can't speak to everybody, but $1 to X, I can't really give away that information, but they all pay the same, right? So, if you're at 100,000, you go from 200,000. With us, it doesn't affect your premium. So the $100,000 guy might say, well, I'm getting ripped off, and the $200,000 guy might say, well, I'm paying what I should pay. I still think, again, this is just me. If you were to go into another industry and try to buy the type of insurance at $100,000, if you're a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, an architect, an engineer, an advertising agency, you're going to run into minimum premium issues. The minimum premium issues are going to be a lot higher in those industries than what they are in IT today. I mean, I had an individual company that was out in California, and they're working with the school district. And the school district said, hey, if you want to keep the contract, you got to take out abuse and molestation insurance. They have 2 people that will go into the principal's office where the server and stuff is and take care of stuff. They still made them take it. For 2 individuals to go there, the minimum premium is $5,000 a year. So that's what I'm saying. For something like that where there's really no exposure, the carriers are saying, and that's not like 1 or 2 that are offering, that's like 10 that we're offering it. But, I still think that the premiums and what MSPs pay today for all the exposure that's out there, it's a steal.
Yeah, and I wonder how long that's going to last, right? With MSPs being an acknowledged target, that's bound to keep changing. I've heard of people whose premiums keep going up, and the funny part is they probably mean that they were never buying the right policy before. And
or what we saw. Yeah, or what we've seen in the past is that, and I don't blame the MSPs for doing this, but you might get with a carrier who comes hot and heavy into the industry, and they're accepting everybody. And if you're not pre-qualifying the risk and you're offering broad coverage, don't be surprised when things go wrong. It'd be no different than if you give someone a 200 credit score, $1 million home, and they don't pay. The bank shouldn't be shocked. And that's what happened is a lot of these carriers came in and said, all this is, this premium's available. We're going to dive into this. And they're asking you who your 5 largest clients are. I've never seen that prevent a claim, Right. With us, we're just a little bit, the onboarding process does take a little bit more time because you got to go through a risk assessment. I got to give that to our risk engineering team. We got to have the risk management people look at your contract, make sure that we think it's good. But if you do that, I mean, again, Steve, an $800,000 client to get a $1,400 first and third party cyber E&O premium with a $1,000 deductible, I think it's fantastic. But again, maybe I just live in the world and I'm numb to it. But I can tell you, I see other people that come across and they're that size and they're paying, double or triple that, and they don't have all the coverages. So I still think it's really affordable. Take advantage of it while you can. Because like you said, I don't know if that train, has left the tracks, in terms of with us. Premiums, I don't know, plus or minus 10 or 15%, have they stayed in there? Yeah, but we just recently went through and updated a lot of the first party agreements, to make sure that we're keeping up the times. We added insuring agreements. So, we want to make sure that our MSPs are properly protected. A lot of carriers, they leave you on legacy policies. In other words, you took the policy out 5 years ago. They don't change it. You keep renewing it. They just keep you with the same coverage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny. I asked you the question about can the smaller guy afford it? And as the words were coming out of my mouth, I thought about it and said, can they afford not to?
Yeah, that's true, right?
You really, whatever the number it is, it is. You need to build it into your cost of doing business. Make sure you're charging enough to cover that when you have contracts out there. Think about that as part of the equation. And, as you said, I mean, in the scheme of things, I don't think these policies are all that expensive. They just feel it because especially if you're going from zero to something, they start to. And
they can. And yeah, I would tell you, the 3 things that the carriers really pay attention to. I mean, I know we do, but now I'm starting to see it other words. Is the lack of contract use is going to kind of hit you. The private cloud exposure. the industry is betting that, whether it's right or wrong, I'm not here to debate this, that Azure, Amazon, Green Cloud, you pick them, that they've got the more money to throw at it. They got more resiliency, more redundancy. They're telling you, hey, take them there, charge a management fee, have them sign the terms and conditions with Azure or AWS, and from a liability standpoint, you're out of there. The carriers do not like the private cloud exposure. They're saying there's no way $1 million MSP can run a private cloud properly. People have to go on vacation. People are sick. Stuff's going to get skipped. They don't like that. And then, it's almost getting to the point MFA has to be on everything internally, on all the critical stuff. If it's not, you're going to get debited. Some carriers won't even write you anymore.
What a great point. And so many people, poured money into private cloud for years now. And there's another reason to second guess that decision. Hey, one last question before I move us along. And this was great, especially the interaction. Thank you. TechRug sells more than just cybersecurity insurance, right? Like if someone needs liability insurance and E&O and all, I'm assuming you're a full service insurance company.
Yeah, we are. Just obviously, for MSPs. I would say that we've got about 1,500 clients, and 80 to 85% maybe are MSPs, kind of MSSPs. And then I would say the rest of the 15% are kind of app dev and IT staffing companies. But that's a majority of what we do. We've got a risk management program that's available. We've got risk engineering folks where if they don't see something and you need them to comment on something. So, I guess in this landscape, we're trying to do as best as we can to prevent our clients from having to go through it. Because I will tell you, I've been on hundreds of lawsuits in 15 years. I've had it where people have lost client data. I've had it where, you're supposed to develop this website and it didn't go through. I want my $50,000 back. All lawsuits are stressful. They are. They're going to cause you angst. They're going to cause you anxiety. The stuff that's going on right now is a Cat 5 tornado. I've had clients that, I had one the other day that emailed me to ask me if they had like therapy that they could go through. I've had clients that have had to take Xanax and sleeping pills. It's not a fun process to go through. And so anything that I feel that we can do for our clients, which is why I was telling you why these calls go on so long, if we can prevent that, then we did our job, because I don't want anybody on this call to go through it because it really is a nightmare.
I think you just clarified another question, but let me just say that anyone you're talking to that says they need therapy, many people call belonging to a peer group like MSP Ignite Therapy for business owners. So you might want to throw them our way.
All right, deal.
Sometimes we have to hear things and process for a while. And someone asked earlier if you sell insurance to IT providers that are not MSPs. And I don't want you to answer because I think I know the answer now. The fact of the matter is, if you're not an MSP, and let's say you're a stereotypical break-fix provider of IT services, then you are most likely also operating without contracts in place, and you are a huge risk to sell insurance to at that point. Is that fair?
Yeah, again, going back, contracts just have to be, I'm sure the lawyers are going to love me on this call, right? But they just got to be part of the process, even for the break-fix clients. It doesn't happen as frequently now with it, but I can't tell you the number. I only got two hands. The number of times over 15 years where on a break-fix job, someone goes out, and by the way, there are break-fix agreements available, but, they go out to the job, they install the antivirus in the firewall, the client doesn't keep up with the updates, they get, they click on something or get ransomware or something happens, and then they call up the MSP, or the IT provider, I should say, and they say, hey, listen, I'm shut down. And the client or the break fix guy goes, well, you didn't pay me to monitor that. And he says, you didn't tell me that.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they're suing you. And then the attorney is going to go on the other side and say, why didn't you tell my client? My client's, and he's a chiropractor. He cracks back. He doesn't do IT. How does he know he's supposed to upgrade this stuff? You didn't tell him that. And you're going to lose in court 10 out of 10 times. The jury does not like it. They're going to be sympathetic to the others. They're going to say, that's your job. You need to tell them.
We talk to people in transitional states all the time where a percentage of their business is managed services and a percentage is that legacy client that they're struggling to move. And you really have just highlighted more than ever, while you don't have to get rid of that client that doesn't want to move to a managed service agreement, you do have to put an agreement in place and a rather strongly worded assumption of risk in that agreement, notifying the client of all the things they have not elected to have you do. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, going through these again, and you know, most of the time the clients that don't want to sign the contract. I mean, I think you'll find that, you know, again, I hate to generalize, but 80-85% of your clients probably don't have a problem. They're just going to do it, you know. And if you phrase it as, hey, listen, for my insurance, because again, if you're checking a box, you see on the application, it'll ask, do you use written contracts? If you're saying yes and you're not using it, you know, you're not lying to them when you say, hey, listen, you know, we need to get this in place in order for me to comply with my insurance. That's much better than, hey, Mr. Client, sign this contract, you know.
Great.
But yeah, but if you don't do it, you know, what that client's telling you when they're pushing back is they're saying out of one side of your mouth, I don't want to sign the contract, because on the other side of their mouth, they're saying, I want to see you know what, when things go wrong. And they want you to be their piggy bank. And I'm here to protect MSPs. And if I'm opening my liability, all your liability to one client, and something happens that affects 4 clients, it's not going to end well. We just can't do it. We have to limit the exposure. Again, it's a hazardous world right now, environment, I should say, that we're in. You have to do your part. But the client also has to do their part. They have to make sure that they've got cyber insurance. They have to make sure that they're following some sort of NIST cybersecurity framework. The, hey, I'm too cheap to do anything doesn't absolve liability from you guys. You're still going to get in trouble.
That's a great point, a great last point. So I want to thank everybody for their time today, especially both Justin and Dave. You do have Justin's contact info on the screen right now, along with Dave's and myself. We will send this slideshow out to everybody, and we will also make the recorded version available to you all. If you are not sure what you're doing and where your coverage is, I strongly recommend reaching out to Justin. He's been involved with the industry for a long time. Many of you have heard the name TechRug before. I only learned recently what it stood for, but at least I've heard the name for a long time. Those that are not involved with a peer group, we strongly recommend you consider one. Give us a call. We'd love to talk to you about our 100% money back guarantee to let you try. And thank you all. Have a great afternoon.